Good evening to one and all. On behalf of VS College of Pharmacy, I welcome you all to our webinar on Motivational Talk by Startup Founder, organized by Institute's Innovation Council of VS College of Pharmacy. I welcome our today's speaker, Raghuveer Surupa sir, and I also extend my welcome to the faculty members of VS College of Pharmacy, students, and the participants. Before starting with our today's webinar, I would like to invite Dr. Mustaq Sheikh, Head and Associate Professor, Department of Pharmaceutical Chemistry, to give a brief introduction of Institute Innovation Council IIC of VS. So over to you, Mustaq sir.
Very good evening to one and all. Yeah, on behalf of VS College of Pharmacy and Institute Innovation Cell, I welcome you all to the IIC 4. This is our, in fact, fifth event, and I'm very glad to share with you all that with you all cooperation of all the participants and the team, we have won this time 4-star ranking for IIC VESCOP. So let us continue the same legacy and let us build the culture of innovation and entrepreneurship. And I hope today's speaker will add to our knowledge and add to our enthusiasm towards becoming innovator as well as entrepreneur. I'm also very glad to share with you all that two things I'm going to announce today. First thing is that those who are participating very well throughout the year in this kind of activities, they will be awarded with a special kind of award called as ISC Star Participant Award. That is one thing. Second thing, I'm also sharing that once this talk is over, we are going to share one quiz with all the participants herein. And if you attend it very nicely and if you give right feedback to us, so which can improve our activity, a prize of mere 100 rupees kept for that, but there is a very high chance that you can win it every time. So with these two announces, I will announce the beginning of this session. Over to you, the moderator. Thank you very much. And let's have a learning session today.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the brief introduction about the IIC. So, before beginning with our session, we encourage you to please post your questions in the chat box, and these questions will be answered at the end of the session. Now I would like to introduce our today's speaker, that is Raghuveer Surupa sir. It is an honor and privilege to have amongst us Raghuveer Surupa sir. Raghuveer Surupa sir has completed his bachelor in electronics and communications and postgraduate diploma in management, marketing and operations. He is the founder at STEMtech Medical Devices. STEMtech Smart Temperature Management is a platform for medical devices that provide targeted temperature management for critically ill patients. He has an experience of 6 years, 5 months at TEDx Dharavi. TEDx Dharavi focuses on bringing people together on a common platform, make connections, and share knowledge on the relevant topic of discussion. He even has an experience of 3 years and 4 months in Pfizer. He was also a part of the CNS team to have pioneered virtual ad boards in Pfizer, India, an initiative that was widely appreciated across the globe for its novelty and cost effectiveness. Currently, he is working on newer technologies, including mobile apps and augmented reality, to improve the effectiveness of in clinic communication. He has also proposed an electronic approval process for claims and IAA inventory adjustment advice and developed effective SOPs for the same. He has also worked on a professional scales officer for 6 months to develop a deeper understanding of ground realities of pharmaceutical sales. With this brief introduction, now I request Raghuveer Surupa sir to please take over the session on motivational talk on startup founder. Over
Yeah,
to you,
great.
sir.
Great. Thank you so much, Prajakta. And hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here and interact with all of you. Um, and given the scope of this session, what I intend to achieve over the next 20 minutes through the session is to be able to share some glimpses and some parts of my entrepreneurial journey. Also, try and emphasize on points that could be a key takeaways for you in case you guys are also planning to think of your own entrepreneurial venture, maybe now or maybe in the future. So probably some takeaways that will help you be better prepared, right? So that is the objective of this session. And with that, I'd quickly share my presentation and initiate the talk. Great. Sure. So, before we get into the journey and how we went about building STEM Tech, I'd briefly talk about STEM Tech and what we do, right? So, STEM Tech stands for Smart Temperature Management. So, it's a platform of devices that help provide targeted cooling for the part or complete body of a patient who's undergoing critical illnesses. So, by externally regulating the temperature of the body of a patient, we are able to provide certain health benefits. Now, there are several applications of this technology across different streams of healthcare. But however, we'll go through that over the course of this presentation. But for now, I'm Raghuveer. As Prajakta already introduced, I have about 8+ years of experience in healthcare and 5+ in oncology, and I'm the founder of STEM Tech. And my co-founder is Mr. Suresh, who has over 35 years of experience in healthcare. Now, moving on to the my journey so far. Yes, I've graduated from my engineering college in Hyderabad back in 2009. After which I pursued my MBA and finished my MBA in 2012. Post which, for the last 9 to 10 years, I've been working in healthcare. Right, and I worked in companies such as Pfizer, Roche. I've started my first startup called as Dignite Cancer Care in 2018, and now this is my second startup that I've started at the beginning of the lockdown in 2020. Now, during my experience with pharma, such as in companies such as Pfizer and Roche, I did get a much deeper understanding of how healthcare as a business operates in India. Understand how doctors think, how patients think, how hospitals think. Having a well-versed understanding of the space or the market that you operate in definitely adds when you're planning to be an entrepreneur in a healthcare domain, right? So I think the 5 years that I spent in the MNCs definitely gave me that exposure and understanding of how healthcare operates in India. Now, moving to the problem that we're tackling through STEM Tech medical devices, since all of you are pharma grads, I'm sure you already know this, that hair loss during chemotherapy, that is cancer treatment, is considered to be the most one of the worst side effects of chemotherapy, especially for women, right? And there are enough surveys that show how big of a deal it is for women. Like 56% feel that it's a worst side effect, 33% wanted to discontinue treatment, right? And 72% said that social life and appearance was affected due to hair loss. So it's a fairly big problem that most of the women undergoing cancer go through. Now, how can we solve this problem? So the solution is EVA scalp cooling. Now, EVA scalp cooling is a scalp cooling device that we've developed that helps reduce hair loss caused by chemotherapy. Right now, this device is to be used by a trained nurse in a hospital setting during the chemotherapy infusion, and it gives patients an opportunity to keep their hair during the course of their treatment. Right? So we are the third company to globally develop this device. We are completely research developed and manufactured in India, and we focus on creating affordable and accessible solution to Indian patients. And we also are ours is a proprietary design that is patent pending. Now, these are some aspects. So as you can see, I explained to you what the problem is, right? A clear problem and the clear user profile of that solution, and also a little bit around the solution and what makes my solution tick in the market, right? These are the two aspects that I'd want for you to remember. And now, so this is a brief about my startup, right? Now, moving forward, like if any of you guys were to say, okay, how to start up, right? What are the things that I need to do or I need to know if I were to start up, right? So the most critical thing that I would say is for you to solve a real problem, right? When I say a real problem, it means you need to really dig deep into the customer's mindset, understand why it is a problem, because not every problem is worth solving, and not every problem that you solve can create a sustainable business, right? So you need to ask yourself, if I do solve this problem for users, will I be able to create a solution that can create sustainable revenue and can sustain the company? Now that's a real question. So having a problem that is thoroughly researched and understood is very critical, and that is where having a work experience or some sort of an exposure to the market where you want to do your startup really helps, because it puts that problem into real perspective, right? You could be a customer as well who's facing this problem, who wants to solve this, right? But having some sort of an experience in that industry or an awareness around that industry definitely does help, right? Now that you now after identifying the problem, right, and the next important thing is to figure out what is the fastest and the most frugal way to showcase that your idea has potential, right? So I say fastest because time is money. You don't want to spend a lot of time experimenting to understand what works, right? You need to figure out what is the fastest way. And also you need to be frugal about it, right? You don't want to spend too much money on experiments for you to understand whether the idea has potential or no, right? Now this becomes the second most critical and crucial step for you to evaluate and understand whether your idea works or no, right? So that aspects, like I mentioned, includes in-depth interviews with the customers, users, the gatekeepers, everyone in the market who have some sort of another influence on your product and your market needs to be interviewed, and you need to understand their perspective, right? And building a minimum viable product. An MVP is basically a product that is put together that can mimic or showcase the solution, right? That through which you can get feedback, acceptance, validation from your customers. Now, showcase this device works in a lab setting. I say a lab setting because since most of you are pharma or health related graduates, you might consider healthcare. It's not obviously necessary, but showcasing the device in the lab setting, and getting early users on board if possible, generate traction and revenue if possible. Now I say if possible because in healthcare there are a lot of regulatory guidelines that one has to meet before one gets into a hospital setting, right? So that's why I said get early users and generate traction if possible. If you're operating up or developing a product that has lesser regulations, then you can definitely show this sort of a validation as well, right? Now that you've identified the two steps, which is the problem, and second, the ways and means through which you can validate and show the solution works, right? Now comes the interesting part. The table that I've made here, the chart that I've made here, is more so focused on medical device because that is the field that I come from, but it gives you a very good perspective, right? So if I were to talk about my experience, I worked in the healthcare domain where I've had experience in sales, marketing, and distribution, right? So these three functions, I was part of MNCs where I was handling a role in these divisions, which gave me a good perspective as to how this works, right? However, if you see the kind of roles that an entrepreneur has to take, you will see that right from building the team to product development, quality assurance, lab certifications, preclinical and clinical validations, the regulatory strategy, the manufacturing of the device, fundraising for the company, a pilot launch, marketing, sales, distribution, identifying the right business model, after sales service, legal, patent strategy, taxation compliance, and product pipeline, right? All of these aspects, just one second. Apologies for the delay, guys. Sure. So, as I was saying, all of these things fall under the purview of an entrepreneur, right? So, you're a healthcare entrepreneur. You have identified the problem and you identified the solution, and you showcase that the MVP works. But these are all the subsequent steps that you need to follow to be able to take that product from where it is to a product that could be commercialized in the market, right? So there is legal, there is patent strategy, there is taxation, and there is also product pipeline for managing the future of the company, right? Now when you look at all of these things, the first, any person would feel overwhelmed, right? Because when we talk about multinational companies, people specialize and spend their entire careers specializing in one of these boxes, right? As an entrepreneur, you need to be able to understand limited aspects of what you need to know from all of these boxes so that you can assimilate, execute them, and then get your product ready for the market, right? So now this is the most daunting task. Like, how do you take your product from where it is and get it to the market without having a thorough understanding of all these, right? So this is where the team plays a very critical role, right? So if you have a well-versed team that has engineering capabilities or capabilities in medical, probably a doctor, or people with manufacturing and design capabilities, or people with commercial capabilities. All of these help for you to take the product from where it is to get it to the market. Now that is the reason why you always hear that the team is the most critical part of a startup, right? Because this is the reason. At any given point in time, any startup would be pressed for time, money, resources, and people, right? At any given point in time, it's a game where you have to prioritize which are the must do things to keep the company moving forward by the limited resources that you have, right? So one way I like to think to approach is by saying, in each of these buckets, what are all the tasks that I as a founder need to achieve to take my product forward, and how do I need to go about it, right? So if you have to think about it, there are seven things that come to mind, right? Which, or most of them I have used, which is either do it yourself. You can learn about these things and start doing it yourself. You can find a co-founder to join your team and who can equally pick up work hand in hand with you and take things forward. You can either hire employees, hire interns, hire consultants, find strategic partners and collaborators, or find advisors and mentors. Now these are all the options that you're at your disposal to figure out how you're going to navigate through this entire path, right? So this is the most critical aspect, or the slide, that I feel, where most of the entrepreneurs do get stuck, right? Because either because of lack of money, lack of people, lack of capabilities, or lack of acceptance in the market. So there are a whole bunch of reasons where there are people get stuck here. So it's important for you to be able to divide all of these points and think how best you can manage them. And now that so one of the questions that I was asked to speak about fundraising, which according to me is a highly overrated topic in any startups, because it tends to get the maximum chunk of PR, right? Whenever we think of startups, the second word that comes to mind is fundraising, right? But I would like to take this opportunity to tell each and every one of you that it is one of the milestones in a startup journey, right? As you can see in my earlier slide, there are a whole bunch of things that are necessary for a startup to succeed, and fundraising is one of them. But fortunately or unfortunately, that tends to get the maximum amount of coverage in terms of airtime, right? So that's the reason why people talk about it a lot. It's a great validation, fundraising, for your startup, but it does not in any means guarantee success. So success is a far and a long road, which is a continuous improvement process, and fundraising is just one of the milestones. And when we talk about fundraising, I think the ultimate money source for any startup is the money from the customers, right? And unfortunately, in healthcare, it's not the case, because significant investment needs to go in before we get our first customer on board. But at the end of the day, having paying customers is the highest form of validation for any startup, right? Now, before fundraising, what one needs to keep in mind is, the more you de-risk your startup, the more likely you are to raise funds. If you were to follow the first two steps that I gave in the first two slides, which is solve a real problem and have an in-depth understanding of the problem, and then have a minimum viable product that can be tested on users and you can get feedback and even early traction, that significantly de-risks your startup, right? So the more the risk, more the equity given to investors. So it's a simple game. Like, if the risk associated with your startup and the uncertainty is significantly higher, then the investor would charge a lot more equity, which is a percentage of your company, for the amount of money that they invest, right? So the question before any fundraising is, how can you de-risk your startup with the least amount of resources, right? So that really helps you put on the right perspective when you're planning, or when you're even raising funds for your startup. And uh, and for those who are keen on being an entrepreneur, right, or wanting to start something on their own, it's very important to have a very clear understanding as to why you want to do that, because the journey is going to be hard and the journey is going to be long, right? And few of the aspects, which is the uncertainty of income, right? So it's very difficult to predict the kind of income that you can make as an entrepreneur, until your business becomes sustainable and you get standardized revenues, it could take anywhere from 2 to 3 years, or maybe more, to 5 years, or maybe more, right? So that's the kind of uncertainty in lifestyle that you need to expect. There will obviously be family responsibilities for you as you keep growing, so you need to keep that in mind as well. The highs and the lows. The highs are really great, but the lows can be extremely painful, because a lot of emotions and expectations are riding on your plans. So when they go south, it can be very difficult for you to deal with. Decision making with high stakes, more or less for the first 1 or 2 years, the decisions that you take can make or break your company, right? So that's the kind of high stakes that you have in decision making, and could result in some stress, right? And learning several new skills from scratch. So for example, most of you, I mean all of you, might be pharma graduates watching this, right? You could start a healthcare company, but that doesn't mean that you can get away from finance. That doesn't mean that you can avoid taxation. That doesn't mean that you can avoid manufacturing or quality assurance or any of the other aspects, right? It might not be under your comfort zone, but things that you need to learn and pick up and understand the relevance of these to the success of your startup, and learn accordingly. So start getting work experience, or do you want to start something after getting work experience, or do you want to start a company as a startup, right? So as a fresher. So now this is a very common question that most people ask, right? And the answer is neither, right? If you have work experience, you have additional baggage. If you have work experience, you're not comfortable, you might not be comfortable with as much, failure. If you have work experience, then you cannot easily accommodate or adjust to an uncertainty of income. And so these are some of the issues that people with work experience face, case in point being me, who have worked for 5 years and then I had to get into the startup journey. And it could be quite difficult for you to be able to deal with all these changes after getting used to the comfort of a standardized work income, right? And as a fresher, definitely the challenges are different, because you do not have experience, you do not have the understanding, and you will require some time to come up with the rational and logical thinking that is needed for you to start taking decisions. But on the contrary, as a fresher, there are so many other avenues, which is you would have far more time on your hands, you would have far less familial responsibilities. You can deal with uncertainty of income until you start getting those responsibilities, and you could easily fail. And it's far easier to also form teams as a student group, right? So these are the advantages that you have. So there is no right or wrong answer to people who want to start their entrepreneurial journey either with work experience or without. For me, I think it's one and the same. It all depends on the appetite of the person to uh, who's willing to persist and continue on that journey. And the few things that you need to consider is that I wish I had done more of before I had gotten onto this journey, is to interact with more founders in the similar industry. So when you go about with your idea and executing your startup, you'll see that there are uh, a lot of assumptions that you make around the acceptance of your idea, or around how your idea will fare in the market. But it's always better to interact with seniors and some other founders in similar industry who could give you a far better perspective, right? From their experience, from their actual real experience. Read a lot of books, right? Get your hands on every relevant book on startup, or book specific to your industry, that will really help open more avenues of thinking for you as an entrepreneur. And if you can work or do internship projects in companies where you can gain relevant experience. So if you're thinking of a medical device startup, go join a medical device startup company. Reach out to them, talk to the founding team or someone in the company, and say that I want to do an internship with you, right? And be proactive in terms of getting those opportunities. It really helps, right? Because all the learning that you get is directly helping you run your startup better. So work or internships in companies of similar interest is a definitely a big plus. And you need to again understand the potential of your idea, market opportunity, in-depth user analysis, business model ideas. all of these things you could do even before starting your company full-fledged. Most of these work, the research work that you could do even before getting onto your idea full time. So these are some of the things that I wish I had known or I had taken in a more structured fashion before I decided to take the entrepreneurial plunge, right? So with that, I close my presentation and I'd like to open this round for questioning. And yes, so thank you for your time. So please let me know if there are any questions.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir, for such an insightful session. And we have learned many more things about the startups and all. So thank you for your guidance. And now this forum is open for question answers. So we have a question from Sorali Bhakre. Should I form my company as C corporation, an S corporation, an LLC, a partnership, or a sole proprietorship?
It's a fairly technical as in a CA related question. Okay, it it all depends on the kind of future plans that you have for your company. If you want to, for example, raise investment for angel investors and others, you would have to form a private limited company, right? However, if you are planning to just execute your idea, run it, generate small revenue, and see and test the market, I would say sole proprietorship, because you can quickly get done with the formalities. Don't have to spend much money on the bookkeeping and all the other aspects. So there are different routes that you can take depending on the goals that you have. So you can start off with sole proprietorship, run the company for 6 months to 1 year, and then when you're ready for funding or taking it to the bigger level, then you can consider private limited company. Right? Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. We have a next question from a YouTube user. Can cannabinoids be the next big thing in cancer treatment?
I don't know. I don't think I can answer that question because it's beyond my technical ability to answer. It's more of a scientific question around the application. But from what I do understand is it definitely has applications from a pain relief standpoint, right? So when cancer patients undergoing cancer or a late cancer, uh, pain is a very big point, right? So cannabinoids have certain applications of reducing pain and managing pain, but that is the only thing that I'm aware of. So I don't know whether it'll be a big thing or no. So I can't comment on that.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. We
Okay.
have our next question from Kajal Birthday. How much should I capitalize my business with at the beginning?
Uh, I don't quite understand the question. So, is your question how much capital do I need to start off for my business? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, maybe she want to ask that.
If your question is how much money do I need to be able to start my business, uh, it varies. Like there is no one answer for it, right? If you're a software engineer and who's building a product online, probably your laptop and electricity is all that you need, right? But if you're a hardware company, then it could go into several lakhs or even crores, right? So there is no straightforward answer to the amount of capital needed to start your business. But like I said, if you are able to go through the process that I suggested earlier, which is developing the MVP, understanding how to get the initial users on board, and etc., it would probably help you put better perspectives and allocate funds to different activities. That gives you the answer as to how much is the capital that you need to start your business.
Yeah, thank you, sir. So
Sure.
we have a next question from Abhijit Wadre. What
Sure.
was your key driving force to become an entrepreneur?
That's uh, so I I was in a very comfortable job, right? I have no complaints of my work experience in Pfizer and Roche. I was in a very well-to-do situation. I used to earn a lot, and it was good. But I think the motivation for me is not even to say that I'm going to change lives of cancer patients. No, right? I think the motivation for me is more of a curiosity, right? I really wanted to understand how would it be to start a company on your own and be able to run it successfully, right? What does it take? What sort of a challenge would it present, right? So I think that curiosity was the major reason for me to take this journey.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah,
We have a next question from Prajwal Raut. What makes an effective leader?
I think it's a fairly generic question. Like, as in, when you say effective leader, uh, there are many aspects to this, and I don't know where to essentially start. But I would say the most critical thing is being able to unite different people with different perspectives, right? All of them being able to unite all of these people to a common objective, which could be the vision for the company, right? I think that is a very effective leader, because when you have different people with different perspective and outlooks in life working in a company or in a setup, how can you align all of them to point in a particular direction and ensure we achieve it, right? I think that inspiring them to, and aligning them to a particular goal, I think that is one of the most critical aspects of an effective leader, is what I think.
Thank you, sir. We have a next question from Sopanika Nair. How do you build a successful customer base?
So it's a painful process for any startup or for any entrepreneur for that matter, right? So you build, like I mentioned, an MVP. You go to the first set of customers, you give them the MVP, understand and learn the feedback from their usage, improve the product further, get more customers on board. It is uh, it's a big brick by brick process, right? More often than not, it's a very again, the initial phases are very slow and painful, because at every step you're learning something about the customer and something about your product as to how the customers use. So that is going to be the most painful part, but you need to spend a lot of time there, right? But once you do that basic part up and ready, once the fundamentals are built in place, scaling up is just a matter of question, right? From there on to building your a much bigger customer base would only require right amount of resources and talent. But the first critical part is the most painful and the painstaking part of acquiring customers.
Thank you, sir. We have a next question from Shivani Mahule. What advice would you give to someone who has an idea at a college level and wants to convert it into a model or prototype?
The advice is do it. It doesn't matter where you are. If you're able to break that idea into smaller parts and see what you can execute. And college is a great place, right? You have people with so many different interests, people with so many different streams, professors who have so many different capabilities. It's a great place to want to try and build a prototype. So if you my only advice is for you to go ahead and do it. It doesn't matter how it looks, how it feels, or what people think of it. Just even if it is a broken prototype made of cardboard, make it. So I think that's the only advice.
Sure, sir. Thank you. We have a next question from Nagesh Nagde. How to raise seed fund for a startup?
Yeah. So the first round for any startup is the most difficult round, right? Because you're still working on your prototype, you're still trying to showcase the potential that it has, and there is a lot of risk associated with your startup. So even before you raise the seed fund, you need to do a lot of research around the investment landscape in a country or in a sector, right? So when we open our internet and when we go to your story or any other platform, you will see that there is every second startup is raising funds left, right, center, and all of these values are to the tune of tens and hundreds of crores, right? But in essence, that could be slightly misleading, right? You need to really thoroughly focus on what is it that you're building, what industry does it fall in, which are the investors who are keen on investing in these industries, understand what sort of investments they have made, understand where your startup falls in all of these things, and then approach the investor. So again, another point would be, do not directly approach any investor. It's a waste of your time, it's a waste of their time. and you would spend a lot of time following up, trying to get them on calls, following up on emails. It's not worth it. I would instead suggest spend all of that time on researching on the right kind of investors for your startup, for your product, for your market, and everything, right? Customize and handpick those angel investors or funds that invest, and then go after them with a lot of focus. So that's that's the route to raising the first seed fund.
Thank you, sir. We have our next question from Mamta Veena. How do you approach in market for scaling up of the idea?
So actually, scaling up is the easy part, right? Scaling up happens after you uh, go through all the initial stages, right from building the prototype to getting your customers on board to understanding whether it's working or no, and to create a product that has a potential of success is the 0 to 1 part, so what they call it. But from there on, if you are thinking of scaling, there are several tools and there are several mechanisms through which you can go ahead and scale your startups, right? It could either be through partnerships, it could be through it depends again on the industry when you talk about scaling, right? If you're a digital company scaling, there are optimum number of mechanisms for you to scale, right, in terms of acquiring customers. If you're an offline industry, there are many ways. Like you can either increase your field force, or you can increase your, you can form collaborations, or you can find strategic partners. There could be many ways of scaling. But I think the first question is to figure out what is the best. Go through the aspect of identifying the product that has the potential to scale, right?
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for answering all the questions in
Sure.
details and all. Thank you for taking us through your journey in setting up STEM tech medical devices, giving us key tips on risk, opportunities, challenges in the journey of an entrepreneurship, and how should we rightly approach an attitude of an entrepreneur. So we have learned all the things from your presentations, and you have guided us a lot. Thank you so much. Uh,
Absolutely. So thank you so much, Prajakta, and also thank you to the professors who have invited me to take this session for the students. I'm very happy to be here, very happy to answer your questions. And in case there are any students who are keen on pursuing something in healthcare or starting something in healthcare or have ideas in healthcare, please feel free to reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to provide you the guidance or advice or whatever it is that I can do to help you in that journey.
Thank you, sir. Sorry, sir.
Sure.
Actually, we have some more questions.
Oh, there are
Uh,
some more. Okay.
yeah.
A lot
The
of
question
questions.
is, what are some of your daily habits that drive you to keep working towards entrepreneurship?
I don't. I can't say that I have very many good habits that usually are available online. I'm not part of any 5 a.m. clubs or anything like that, but I do work out 3 to 4 times a week. It really helps, right? Physically you're fitter, mentally you're better, so that really helps. And yeah, I think I love playing the guitar, so that music is a great sense of escape for me. So during some not so good days or great days, it really helps, right, to have some sort of a hobby that you can pursue. So pick up a hobby and have some sort of a consistent lifestyle and take good care of your body. I think these things, and your mental health as well, so I think those really help getting through the uncertainties.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. Sir, what was the most challenging thing, like about being an entrepreneur? What challenges did you face? And,
So the only thing that you will face are challenges, right? The only thing, like when you start up, right? And for me, the bigger challenge was my first company, which was Dignite Cancer Care. Unfortunately, I had to shut operations at the beginning of the lockdown. So after that, I had already started working on STEM tech. But for the first 6 months of STEM tech, we had developed the prototype and we had made the MVP during the lockdown, right? Essentially, all components, etc., we somehow managed to buy them online, either on Amazon or on India Mart, or any source, right? Because we physically couldn't step out of the house, right? So it took me painstaking 5 to 6 months to decode and try and create an MVP that can showcase the kind of validation that I need for my product. So that was one of the bigger challenges. But other than that, like I said, almost every step of the way you will have challenges. In building your company.
Thank you, sir. Our next question is, what have been your most significant failures and what have you learned from it?
So the majestic or the significant failure that I have was how I had to pivot from Dignite Cancer Care, which was my first startup. Right. So I'll spend a minute or two trying to explain why it was a failure. I wouldn't call it a failure now that I look back. It's a wrong assumption, right? The assumption that I made did not pan out, right? So that's how I look at it now. So in Dignite Cancer Care, the aspiration was to create a niche e-commerce website for cancer patients, wherein which patients can buy all the daily use products that they need while undergoing treatment. So typically, patients undergo treatment ranging from 4 months to 6 months or maybe more, right? So during this time, how can we improve the life of patients by creating these daily use products, right? And making them available in one place. Now the idea was novel. Patients liked the idea. Doctors somehow had mixed feeling about the ideas, right? But when I started executing it, the key assumption that I made was patients are empowered enough to take their own call on the kind of products that they'd want to buy and use, right? But over the course of time, I found that patients do not take a call until and unless a doctor asks them or recommends them to do something. Right? So that was a very big learning that I've had. Now, that is an assumption that I made that patients might be willing to buy. But unfortunately, after running that for a little over 1.5 to 2 years, both online and even offline, we had partnered with hospitals and set up offline as well. We figured that patients do not act that way, right? So that was one of the key learnings that we got. But again, through that experience, I also interacted with hundreds of patients on a day, regularly, which gave me a much in-depth understanding of the customer base that I was serving, right? So the biggest failure or the setback that I've had was when I had to shut down my first startup. And sure, that's what I'd say. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. So, last question. What is the recipe to success for an entrepreneur?
Wow.
Basically, how to
How
become a
does any
successful entrepreneur?
there is no answer to this question. There is no recipe, but I would say that the most critical trait that you need to have, according to me, is persistence. Right? So you might be intelligent, hardworking, very smart. You could have the best skills or the best academic grades or anything, right? But the most critical thing that I feel is to have the persistence to move on from one challenge to the other. Sometimes you fail, sometimes you succeed, but always keeping, always moving forward and persisting, right? So I think that is the core trait. I don't know whether it's a recipe, but it's a core trait that I feel will definitely help you be successful. And also it depends on how one defines success, right? So it's not necessarily that you go on an entrepreneur journey and you become a millionaire or a billionaire. That's not the objective, right? The objective is for you to go through these challenges, for you to experience these challenges and figure out how you can push yourself to solve these challenges, right? Even whether it succeeds or doesn't, because at the end of the day it's a probability. Even if it doesn't, you emerge out a winner because you've given it your 100% and you've solved so many problems across so many different types of business areas, right? So you'd always come back being successful. But if you were to say that how can you create a sustainable business, I would say persistence. And it's a very underrated trait that is talked about, because it takes 3 years or 5 years or maybe more to be able to create a big business. So you need to have that sort of a patience and persistence to pursue your idea.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your guidance.
Sure.
Before we conclude today's webinar, now I would like to invite Dr. Anita Aire, Head and Associate Professor, Department of Quality Assurance, to propose a vote of thanks. So over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Prajakta. First of all, I would like to thank Mr. Surupa for agreeing for this session as a resource person at a very short notice. And whatever tips you have given based on the journey in your entrepreneurial journey, those tips I am sure that our students would definitely take a note of it and use it, apply it further for their own journeys. And I would also like to thank you for expressing your key interest in assisting us in further mentorship or advisoryship. So definitely we have a couple of groups every year who are interested to take their idea ahead and convert it into a prototype. So your mentorship and advice would definitely be helpful to them. So thanks a lot for that. I would like to thank our entire IIC team 4.0, the student members as well as the faculty members who have assisted and supported in making this particular event a success. Big thanks to our back-end ICT team, Dr. Anand, Mrs. Prachiti, the compeer for the day today, Ms. Prajakta, our president, Dr. Mushtaq Sheikh sir, our management and principal madam for continuously being supportive and motivational and encouraging us to conduct these sessions. So that is a big motivating factor for us. So thank you all of you, and last but not the least, thanks to the audience for making it a truly interactive session by posting your questions in the chat box. So that was the highlight of the session for me, because a one way interaction is never useful. It's always a participative interaction that really helps in the success of the session. So thanks a lot to our entire audience. Thank you once again, all of you. Stay safe. And Prajakta, over to you to make some few announcements and then conclude the session. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. So there are few. Thank you, ma'am. There are few announcements. The link for the feedback form is shared in the chat box. All the participants are requested to fill the feedback form. E-certificates will be issued to all participants after the submission of feedback form. Do subscribe to our college YouTube channel, VS College of Pharmacy, and stay connected with VESCOP through our social media handles to get information on our upcoming events and activities. With this, we now conclude the session. Thank you everyone for joining. Stay safe and stay healthy. Thank you.